Hey everybody, this is CSProfessor Pam with PamTech. Teaching is my superpower, and I recently started a new series to teach you React one byte at a time. In the last lesson, what we learned about was something called props in React. And let me actually get our code running right here. I've opened it up in VS Code. I've got a terminal open. So remember, what's the command that we run to start it up? npm run dev. And that starts my application at this particular localhost address. So I'll start that up, and always have your inspector open so that you can see what's going on in the console. All right. So what we did last time was create a component called hello. And hello is a child component of app, right? Because it's being called from app. And the way that you can pass data from parent to child is using something called props. So we learned about props last time. That's a very important concept. We pass props to this component. Here we are destructuring those props so that we can refer to them specifically by their name down here. And that is why we are seeing the code that we're seeing right now. But what I want to talk about today is another fundamental important concept called state. State is really, really important in React. And what I want to do is sort of show you the reason for it by doing something without state first. So just to make this easier for me to kind of separate what I'm doing and also to go back through the steps again. Remember, here in source, I created folders, a folder for components, a folder for pages. Later on, we'll learn kind of how I differentiate components and pages, but for right now, these things are all components. So I am going to make a component. So I want to be inside of components, it's underlined. I'm going to make a folder. I'm going to call it counter, right? I'm not going to do that much styling on it, but just so we are used to the system, the habits here, inside of counter, I am going to make two files, counter.jsx and counter.css. And notice, by the way, now you can clearly see the structure that components is a folder that has two folders inside of it. All right, in counter.jsx, I'm going to use my snippet. Remember, I'm just putting it in a comment here so you'll recognize it. It's RFCE, and that gives me a framework for a new component. I want to see this over on app.jsx. And we really don't need these hello components right now. So I'm just going to comment them out. If I do command or control slash, all right, so those are not displaying on my page right now. So let's put my counter. And I do have an extension that will import this. And so you see, as I type it in, if I click here, we will see that that component got imported. All right, so what are we seeing right now? Just the word counter, right? All right, so let's say that what I want to do is I want to display a count on this page. So I'm going to create just a regular JavaScript variable. Let count equal 1, okay? I want to see that on this page. So let's just make a p tag. That'll be fine. And we'll put count in it. Right? So we see that. Let's actually put, we can put some words in front of it if I want to. I can say count is, and we will see that here. Right? Let's make it like an H3 or something, just to make it bigger and easier for you guys to see what's going on. All right. Let's say that I want to be able to increment this count. So we're actually going to learn two new concepts here. We're going to talk about state, but before we get to state, let's talk about how we attach action to a button. So I'm going to make a button and I'm going to say increment, right? And we see that. All right. Let us, if I want something to happen when I click this button, if you remember from JavaScript, in JavaScript, you would attach a handler for the on-click event, right? In React, it's very similar, but instead of on-click like that, we have to camel case. So on-click is going to be the event. And I want to set up a function that will be run when I click the button. So I'm going to create a function. I'm going to use arrow function syntax. I'm going to say increment. And we have this, right? Let's first of all just console log just the word increment, because we want to see that we have connected this function. As of right now, I have not. And so if I click this button, nothing is happening. That's because in order to make it happen when I click the button, I have to put an on click on this button. And we're going to put increment here. And this is just the name of the function. You don't use parentheses to call it. All right, so let's see if it's attached. Yes, right? Because when I click the button, I'm seeing the word increment. All right. I just want to do a little bit of styling here. So I'm going to import my CSS, counter.css, and let's give this a class name, counter container. And we can give it a little CSS. Let's just, we have two things in there. Maybe we actually want to use display flex column. Flex direction column. Let's give it a height of, I don't know, 200 pixels. Let's give it a background color. Just a little bit to make this kind of interesting and to also get you used to how we style things, right? And maybe I give it a smaller width of like 50%. All right. And along with display flex, we want to justify content center and align items center. There we go. All right. All right, so we have this button, right? And when we click it, whatever is in this function will happen, right? So what do I want to do? I want to increment count. Okay, it's a JavaScript variable. I could say count plus plus. And just to make sure we can see if it has changed, let's print out count is and print out count. All right, let's clear the screen. Let's click the button. And look, count is 2. Of course, I still see 1 here. If I click it again, count is 3. So the variable is changing, but I'm not seeing the update on the page, because what would I have to do to make that happen in JavaScript? I would have to put like an ID on this H3, and we would have to put it in. As a matter of fact, let me just show you. Let's give this an ID of count. I'm going to call it counter. Okay. And I would have to do something like this. Document.getElement by ID counter that text content or inner HTML. Let's do inner HTML equals count. Right? And yeah, we got rid of the words, but you see, so that's how I would have to do that with a regular JavaScript variable. All right. Let me show you the magic of state. State is a very important thing in React. It is what's called a hook. And JavaScript has these hooks that allow you to do certain things. So we have a hook called useState. useState, when you call it, you give it here whatever you want as the initial value for the state, if you need to. And useState creates two things for you. It creates a variable. I'm just going to call it variable here. And it creates a set function, an update function, the function that you need to use, that you must use to change this value. And it returns these two things in an array. And so the way you set up state is like this. We destructure that array. And let's say I call this state count. And let's say I call my function set count. Now, count is now actually the variable. Think of it like a JavaScript variable. But set count is very important. The only way that I can make changes to this special variable is by using set count. All right. So let me just show you what we're going to do here. So first of all, we want to import from React this hook, useState. All right. Instead of a regular variable, I'm going to create state for count. So it's going to be called count. And I could name this function foobar if I wanted to, but then I would have to remember that foobar is the function I have to use to update count. So by convention, what we do is we call this function set, whatever the name of the state is. So this is equal to useState, and I'm going to give it an initial value of 0. All right. And let's comment this out. We don't want to do that anymore. Now let's just see what we have. So count is 0. Okay. So now when I click the increment button, I want to increment count. And as a matter of fact, let's just look at something. Yeah, you see, it's yelling at me because I actually am not allowed to use count ++ to change the value of this now that it's state. What I have to do is use the set function, set count, and I have to give it what I want the new value to be. And I want the new value to be count +1, right? When it starts, count is 0. The first time I click it, 0 + 1 is 1. So that's the new value of state, right? And watch what happens, right? And as a matter of fact, we can go over here and look in our React Dev Tools to see the state that we created. Let me actually refresh this. Right, so here's counter, here's the state. You see it's being initialized to 0. When I click the button, the state changes to 1. So the magic of state is that when you use this set function to change the value of state, React looks for any place that uses that state, and it updates the DOM for you automatically. So you don't have to do document get element by ID to actually change the value. when the state changes, the DOM updates. It is like magic, right? So as a matter of fact, let's say I want to have a decrement button as well. So on click, I'm going to say decrement. I'll have to make this function, right? So I'll make another function. And I'll subtract 1. So I need to set count to what? Count -1, right? Increment it, goes up, decrement it, it goes down, right? So your page reacts to any changes in state, right? So again, let's kind of review what's going on because we're going to be using state a lot. So we have now learned actually 3 important concepts. In the previous video, we learned about props. We're not using any props here because we're not passing any data from parent to child, right? Here is where I create the state. And I could initialize it to whatever I want. Suppose I initialize it to 99. Then that means the first value is 99. And if I increment it, it goes up, right? Or it goes down. So this hook creates 2 things for me, the state itself and the update function that I must use to change it, right? Then we have buttons and we want to make action happen when we click the button. So one of the buttons calls this increment function. The other one calls this decrement function. And how do I increment count? I set it, give count a new value. What's the new value I want to give it? Whatever is the current value plus 1, right? Or here, I want to subtract 1. Give count a new value. What's the new value? Whatever is the current value minus 1. And magically, we see the result of this on our webpage. And it is really, really wonderful. All right. So those are 2 really quick bytes that we've talked about. One, the on click and how to create a function here. I just happen to use arrow function syntax, but it doesn't have to be. But it's important to get used to this function because we use this a lot in something that's called callbacks in certain things. So please make sure you're used to that. All right, so again, we have just a little byte of code here. And it's really important to make sure you understand all the pieces here. If not, please write some questions in the comments, and I would be happy to answer those questions for you. All right, so that's your little byte of React for today. I hope you're progressing along with this series. And please look in the description. If you haven't subscribed, I'd be happy if you join my channel. And you can find references to my webpage. If you're interested in really accelerating your learning, you can book project-based coaching with me. And I would love if you would join our community, my Discord community. So have fun. Hope that was a good bite of React, and I will see you in the next video.